Good evening and welcome to MTV Community Forum. I'm your host, Byron Campbell. And of course, co-host here, Chris Diali. Good evening, Chris. How are you doing? We've missed you in the studio.
Good evening, Byron. Good evening to our viewers and listeners across all the various platforms that we come to you at. And it's a pleasure to be back home in person and in studio in person. Zoom works, but it's not the same.
So tonight, Chris, it's you and I. We have a lot to talk about, many local issues, current affairs issues that are on our minds and the minds of the people.
And the politics too.
And of course we will talk about the politics too. But let's start. So we have, viewers, we have an interesting evening for you. Stay with us, yeah? So Chris, the first thing, of course, Trump's victory. Let me call it that. And I predicted last week that Trump will win the election, Chris. And I didn't give the reason, but for me, it was obvious. It had to do with race, Chris, I believe. It had to do with gender. And let me say the race first, black and white. And that factored, But the gender thing, I felt that America was not showing its readiness for a black woman president. I think so. And I think also it had to do with the manner in which she came in, with Biden, having to be publicly failed before, she didn't come in a normal way and won her position. And so, and it's just the way America is today. But Chris, my immediate concern on this has to do with what is expected out of this election. What is your view on that? What outcomes are you predicting? Are you seeing?
I agree with you from the point of view that probably Kamala came into the race late.
Yeah.
And the populace of the United States didn't get enough chance to know. Remember, Trump had been campaigning for more than 2 years.
Yes.
And she only did a few months.
Months, yes.
So that would have had some impact. Of course, the race issue and of course all the other issues with him and women. Yeah. And I've seen the vote, how much women voted for her versus the men. So all of that, and of course, as you indicated, I don't think they're ready for a woman president yet. So it is one of those things. But my major issue with Trump is not the fact that he has made history of the first convicted felon to become a president. I think there is also the issue of, what he has articulated he will do as president. And for us in this region, the two areas that bothers me is the climate change issue. Because remember, he had pulled out of the Paris Arrangement.
Yes.
Biden went back in, and he has indicated that he's going to come back out again. So he doesn't believe, and his surrogates don't believe in climate change and what is happening with climate change, even though the United States have been receiving serious hits with hurricanes and floods and all of that. Then the other issue for me, of course, apart from climate change, is the whole issue of
Elon Musk, yes.
And the Elon Musk effect.
The Elon Musk effect.
Because Elon Musk have been pumping a lot of millions into his campaign, and Elon Musk is one of those guys who have publicly said that he would like to see all or most regulation dismantled when it comes to major business and what they do and how they can do. That is concerning. Because at the end of the day, if that happens, and more than likely it may happen based on how much contribution he gave to the gentleman, that you could see ripple effects through the world on this and how businesses can operate or not operate, what they can do or not do. Employ people, do a lot of wrong things in business because everything is about profitability and so on. So it sends worrying ripples. And you could see the Europeans, when he won, they were very guarded in that victory and, concerned about some of the things that he had said he would not partake in and would not, in terms of the European Union and what happens with that.
Chris, what you're saying is true. Some of the climate experts, what they've been saying? Trump win is dangerous for the world. And what is likely, because we look at it, how is this likely to affect us? Now, one of the things, he may cut U.S. climate finance contributions to developing countries. That means like Grenada, the Caribbean, certainly.
Let's talk about COP28. On
Exactly.
the brink of starting.
Yeah. But with Musk, you mentioned Musk, so he's likely to lower taxes on corporations and to the wealthy.
Yeah.
And imagine he makes Musk the head of the government efficiency. Means Musk is going to. So it's left to be seen, but clearly I will take it from where it stands. his win is dangerous for the world.
Yeah, and let's segue into COP28 because COP28 is on the verge of starting. They just had COP16.
16N because COP16 in Colombia, biodiversity, that's right.
And if the United States, under President Trump, decides to pull back on climate change, remember one of the big things in COP27 was that SIDS across the world, who are receiving the effect of climate change from these big, massive countries, India and United States and so on and so forth, we have not gotten the kind of monies to deal with the issues that we are facing. You know, we have rising sea levels, issues with crop, the severity of hurricanes and the effects, and a multitude of things.
Well, we can go right there. Or see, look, I was, you know, I'm in the water a lot, Chris, and you see the bleaching of the corals.
That's right.
I mean, it's white, and you know, this continue, they will die. And I mean, that affects our tourism product.
And fisheries.
And fisheries.
Fisheries are
biodiversity,
big thing for
exactly.
Grenada, you understand?
So it is an issue. But Chris, you mentioned COP29, and this is happening November 11th to the 22nd, and this is it's important for Grenada, small island developing state, and the focus is scaling up in that is scaling up climate financing.
That's right.
You know, and if America takes this position, so you see how it ties in with this. So that is something that we need to pay attention to.
In the last few COPs, Brian, and some people get tired of them now. It seems to be just a nice big thing for all the technicians to meet and talk and so on.
Well, 50,000 delegates is attending. That's a lot of people. That's half of our population.
Yeah, and you find at the end of these COPs that we get no definitive action plan with timelines as to how, take for example, the scaling up of the financing. We had Dr. Spencer Thomas talking about the challenges. And you just don't seem, from the last COP, 28 to 29, can we say we have received $100 million in the OECS to deal with climate change? I don't know. Because even though they say they have this money for us, the amount of red tape that is put there to get it. When we got Green Climate Fund funds, Fund Awasa to do all the issues with water security, and it took us almost 6 years
to get it going. So it's a big issue, Chris. So as we said, the question of tackling emissions or financing the cost of climate change. The fund, loss and damage, you know, there were pledges, but it hasn't really happened to the quantity that is needed. But Chris, the fact that one aspect of the meeting is the future role of fossil fuel, that is phasing out the use of CO2 emitting like coal and gas and oil. That brings us to the local situation, because in the news recently, as we all know, we were making international news. Ocean Gate Oil, Gas and Engineering, who is under the leadership, the CEO is one, Dr. Aisha Achimuga, the African name, secured a historic multi-billion deal with Global Petroleum Group to launch one of the Caribbean's largest oil and gas venture. The CEO, this woman, she was saying that it is the foundation for economic collaboration between Africa and the Caribbean. The deal is worth $1.8 billion with the potential for $8 billion, you know, the potential. Now, the question is, what is Grenada's position in this deal? Why we have heard nothing from our administration on it? Why is it tight-lipped? What is it they know and they're not telling us? But let's look a little at the background, Chris. That's important. We know that Grenada owns 37 blocks. This is certain blocks is an area in the sea that is measured. So we have 37 blocks. And the Global Petroleum Group was granted a license. That is a Russian company. They were granted a license by the government of Grenada for exploration of 11 blocks. We know that it was determined that Grenada, from their exploration, that Grenada has significant quantities of oil and gas deposits. It's estimated at 9 trillion cubic feet. That's a lot of natural gas and 200 tons of oil. But after that, after they determined that, they have went forward to government of Grenada to grant them development license for 4 blocks. What the Prime Minister said in a recent interview is that the task force that was set up here, technical task force, headed by our past Finance Minister, Mr. Nazim Burke, heading this group, and they have employed technical personnel to assist them. Some information that was missing previously, we understand was available. Gary Boyne said so. But where did it go from here? What he said was that we will get an update in the new year. But interesting, on the weekend on the Bob report, he said we will get an update later this month. So I'm glad to hear that, because mind you, oil and gas is important. If this comes through, our economy, so it's a good thing. But the question is, why the secrecy? Why is there, why don't we know more about what's happening? Why do we have to listen to international news over and over? Anywhere you Google Global Petroleum Group, you're hearing Grenada, multi-billion. I mean, it's like, but why are we not hearing more from our administration, our government? And Chris, I want to say this, that we've had the same kind of secrecy in previous administration about this. We have to, you had an announcement in the election campaign from the NNP leader about oil and gas and creating a euphoria about it. Then you hear nothing. So we think that the information should be more consistent to the people. We have a right to know.
Well, you know, Byron, let's start from this angle. Both governments have been, last one and this one, very secretive is probably the harsh word to use, but it is what it is.
It is, yes.
I think what happens, when GPG was granted licenses for the 4 blocks, GPG spent a lot of money doing seismic research to understand the potential of
and
these
drilling
blocks and what is going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, 200 tons of petroleum or oil versus 9 trillion of
200 million tons.
200 million tons, right?
Yeah.
Tend to sound that it is commercially viable, right? Because it's one thing to find a deposit, it's the other thing to understand its commercial viability.
Yeah.
Then there's the other issue of the upfront costs in order to invest in drilling and that type of equipment, which is very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, we see from the Guyana situation, most of the companies that are down there that have done the drilling and have done the explorations, and they have come up with huge deposits, their take ranges between 65 and 70% of profits.
Yeah.
And the government gets royalties and the rest and so on.
Yeah.
So I started all of that to say that the group that is technical committee that is headed by Mr. Nazim Burke and the consultants, of course, that is going to be brought in to assist them in developing policy and way forward. But a critical aspect is the contracts.
Yeah.
The contracts that
the existing contracts.
No, the new contracts that will have to develop based on how GPG and the Nigerian company have done theirs.
Yeah.
Now, the fact that the Nigerian company would have signed an agreement with GPG is an indication with Nigeria's expertise and understanding, because they are oil producing country for years.
That's
now.
correct.
The fact that they have done that is indication to me, or signal to me, that what GPG has under the 4 blocks seems to be a lucrative aspect of developing those 4 blocks. So that whatever is between GPG and the Nigerian company, we need to understand how is Grenada going to fit in as a third party, understanding, because we gave a license. The license would have terms and conditions.
Yes.
We're not sure what those are, because again, we're not privy to the information, either from this government or the last government. So if Prime Minister Mitchell says, Dickon Mitchell says that he's going to update us at the end of this month, it means that either things are progressing faster than they need, or they is happening. So he has more information available.
You know that our Prime Minister was recently in Nigeria also, and in fact visited the operations of this company.
Yeah, the particular CEO of the company, a lady, and him was very
precisely.
Much in
But
contact.
Chris, there's another dimension. Now, of course, GPG is a Russian company. There are significant sanctions by the U.S. now on states and companies having to doing business with Russia and Russian companies. Business and countries risk severe civil and criminal penalties, a multitude of economic sanctions exist on export controls and import restrictions and so forth. So could that be something that we are cautious about, that we probably need to investigate this further to see if it implicates us?
Well,
yeah.
I believe the Nigerian company would not sign with GPG if GPG had constraints under these sanctions.
Yeah.
Because
Not with Nigeria.
No, I'm talking about the company in Nigeria.
Right,
They would not have signed with
exactly.
GPG.
Yeah.
Understanding,
Yeah.
because the lawyers would have poured over these documents
exactly.
to understand
Yeah.
there's viability for the two companies.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think the sanctions may
But what
affect
about the
them.
Grenada dimension? That's
Well,
the
no,
point.
again,
Yeah.
is what agreement we signed.
Yeah.
And yes, there may be sanctions by the Russian government or sanctions on the Russian government
and
from
companies,
various
yeah.
countries. But
Yeah.
at the same time,
Yeah.
Venezuela ships oil and gas to
The United States.
And they are very close to Russia and what's going on with Russia. Russia support a lot
Yeah.
of the military
Yeah.
hardware and
Yeah.
so on.
Yeah.
So the sanctions don't seem to apply to the private companies that
Yeah.
have arrangements
Yeah.
before the sanctions came. So
Okay.
sometimes before the sanctions came, if the agreement speaks to how you
Yeah.
want to operate,
Yeah.
it may not apply.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a legal expert,
Yeah,
but
but yeah.
the guys who are in this and the monies we're talking about, the billions, would not engage in anything where they think the risk is so significant from a sanction, international sanction, that their investment will be compromised.
I'm excited, Chris.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
am I-
excited over what time?
well, I mean, well,
We've
I
been
mean,
excited since NNP announced that in 2 election cycles ago and got us all riled up about things will happen and this was going to go on.
Is that- it hasn't
and,
happened, hasn't happened.
Minister Bowen, as he
Hasn't
said
happened, that's-
in his recent public announcements,
Yeah.
a lot of work was
Yeah.
done and so forth
Chris-
and so on.
Chris.
So I want to wait to hear what my Prime Minister says
Yeah.
at the end of this month.
Right, and
Because-
then we take it from
And
there.
then, because you have a budget coming up.
Yes, that's
and
good.
you want to know if that is going to play into the budget figures, whether it's 2025 or 2026. There was nothing mentioned in the throne speech,
Yeah.
so we don't know.
Chris, as you mentioned about throne speech, Chris, the cannabis industry, and why I'm raising this is because on the weekend we had a delegation from Grenada, including the legal minister, the agricultural minister, Anselm Clouden, who is the chairman of the cannabis committee, and others, the Rastas. They went to St. Vincent because St. Vincent celebrated, they had what is called a Cannablist, where they were showcasing their growth or the stage in the cannabis industry. And this was open. I think it was a good thing. I think it was positive that they attended, because we could learn from that in terms of how they've done this. But the question is, why are we so late, Chris? Why are we so behind as a CARICOM country in implementing or in moving forward with our cannabis industry? For example, let me just tell you, in November, when the budget address, the finance minister, he said, and I quote him, that new legislation to deal with this would be in the first quarter of 2024. Last week, we heard the PM saying the first quarter of 2025. So we've moved a year later with no explanation, But Barbados has gone hugely into this industry, a lot of investments. And 10 years later, after CARICOM came out with the investigation and the recommendations, we are nowhere.
Well, Byron, sometimes I don't believe being slow is a bad thing. Why? Because you learn from mistakes and missteps of other countries who have gone ahead of you and develop certain aspects of the cannabis industry. And I believe countries like us can't afford to make huge mistakes because of our GDP and all of that. And if we're going into that as a commercial sector, primarily on the medical side, we have to be careful that we do it right and correct. And then you have to get people to invest in that industry. You have to have land, you have to have security, you have to have a lot of research in the different species. It's not a simple thing to just go in and say, listen.
Chris, we are there because of incompetencies, Let me explain those incompetencies. So when the government came into office, the Minister of Agriculture then, he's presently the Minister of Tourism.
Is Telesford?
No, not Telesford. He's the Minister of Tourism.
Tourism, right.
He set up a committee. The committee worked for a year and came in with the recommendations as far as now. when you had a change of minister to the present one, they set up they
reconstituted it.
reconstituted the committee. I mean, you just wasted time. It had nothing to do
Well,
with due diligence.
Well,
and,
remember
and-
the committee was to deal with the legislative part of the agenda. And Mr. Clouden came on this program here and spoke about
Yeah.
he would have that happening soon under
Yeah.
his watch. It never
Yeah,
happened.
yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of concern about the other aspect of it. You know, when you decriminalize some aspect, I'm not talking about
Chris,
legalize.
that's not what's causing the delay.
No, but they did say that that's
Yeah.
how they're going to approach it.
Okay.
Decriminalizing, so if you get
Right.
the police arrest you with 2 spliff, you
Right,
won't get a
right,
criminal
right,
record.
right, right,
So that was the
right,
first
right.
stage.
Yeah.
And the second stage is to look at a phased approach of the legalization,
Yeah, yeah.
primarily for the medical industry
yeah.
and how it's going to be treated. But
Yeah.
Byron, the other aspect of this thing is the controls that need to be put in place.
No issues with that. I agree.
And I will
because
come to you on
no,
that.
no, it's okay. I agree with the controls. For example, you cannot supply a minor, 18 years and over. I mean, I agree with these things.
How
That's
do
fine.
we effect that in reality? Do
But
we
that's
have a
not-
police section that's going to look at that? How if we have a 17-year-old smoking a spliff, are we going to arrest the 17-year-old? I mean, there is real issues around
I agree with you,
the
Chris.
actioning of these
But
items.
what is contributing to the delays? That's the point. Not the issues you're raising now.
Let me throw something at you.
Sure.
I heard recently a gentleman from the Ministry of Agriculture talking about dealing with how you call the thing, that stealing of agricultural goods.
Pretty elastic.
Pretty elastic.
It's on the rise, Chris.
Right.
This
And you
month
know
is
what he
bad.
said?
Yeah.
You know what he said?
Yeah.
He said they're getting right now to deal with it because they're looking to employ 30 to 40 people and train them in aspects of pre-natal larceny. How long we having problems with pre-natal? How much years now?
Since I was born, Chris.
Right?
Long
No,
time. No,
and-
a long time.
I mean, now we're saying,
Yeah.
I'm not upset that
Yeah.
they're doing
Yeah.
that and hopefully it
Yeah.
will come.
Yeah.
The issue is
Yeah.
we have known about this scourge on agriculture
Yeah.
for many years.
Yeah. Long time.
Many governments have spoken to it.
Yeah.
Many governments have
Yeah.
not actioned
Yeah.
it appropriately.
Yeah.
We don't even have a night court set up to deal with perpetrators and they get caught and all of that. Then we had a transportation issue. And now this young man, I ain't saying nothing wrong, but is it now that we understanding that we're not properly resourcing the pre-natal larceny department and the Ministry of Agriculture?
Chris, and that's a big deal. I'm glad you raised it because it is bad right now. I could tell you, particularly small ruminants like goat
The
and sheep.
gentleman said the same thing.
Those are going now. I don't know if it's the season.
Yeah, he
but you
indicated
can't.
that.
You have few things. Your tree crops, for example, they take these. The hunters are using the opportunities to be in the night to reap your produce. So it is bad, but the effect of it is what's important. It is not encouraging the farmers. It is not motivating
So
farmers.
the point I'm getting at,
Yeah.
with the same cannabis industry,
Yeah.
how do we action these things to get results?
Yeah.
If we don't have a night court to
Yeah.
try these guys or
Yeah.
women quickly,
Yeah.
when they get caught,
Yeah.
either in the act or selling to vendors and they don't have no certification to sell,
Yeah.
and try them quickly and deal with them,
Yeah.
of course the Prime Minister is going to say we have to get a new jail.
Chris, let's go regional a little bit. The whole issue of inter-regional transport in the Caribbean, I know it's been an issue. Clearly, to what extent is affecting intra-regional trade. We heard about a ferry service that would come into operation. I don't think it's coming through Grenada. I think it's Trinidad, Guyana, and some of the larger islands. But what about what's happening? What does it tell us a little about the developments within the traveling vis-a-vis airline travel, air travel?
Since
What
the
is happening
demise
there?
of Liat,
Yeah,
1974,
yeah,
and the resultant effect of travel in the region has become so much more difficult, and not only difficult, so much more expensive. If you want to take a flight from Grenada to Antigua to do business, it will cost you close to $3,000 to get
I
there.
see.
Yes.
So it's cheaper to go to Miami.
Correct. And if it's from Trinidad, it is about 3,000, 5,000 TT to get there. So the issue is costs have significantly risen
Yeah.
for business and movement of people within the region. Then we had the introduction of Inter-Caribbean to come and fill the gap that was created by the demise. Recently, we had the introduction of a new airline Liat 20,
Yes.
right? And then we had another one called Sunrise. Now, my thing is, we can't look at Intercaribbean. Intercaribbean have come with planes. They will tell you, the experts will tell you it's old planes, but they're faster, they're a little better than what we had on the Liat 74. But the Intercaribbean, you cannot depend, the dependability is terrible. Intercaribbean will cancel a flight on you, and there is no alternative based on the time they cancel it and give no real reason for the cancellation. I have been a victim of that, and just recently one of my colleagues going to a business in St. Lucia, they canceled a flight. They were leaving Friday to attend a function, they couldn't. You understand? And this is the part that is the concern. Our prime ministers in the OECS and CARICOM have been talking about this regional travel, both ferry, both on the marine side and on the air side. And we just cannot seem to get a solution to the issue. Intercaribbean. Now Liat 20 come. Liat 20 come and say they're doing a few islands, right? They start and now they're kind of stopping. They cut out some islands because they don't have the volume, they don't have the consistency of the flights.
Is it cost?
I believe so. Cost is an issue. Okay, let's take Caribbean Airlines, Carl. Caribbean Airlines, after the subsidy from the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago was cut to Caribbean Airlines, their costs to travel between inter-islands have significantly risen. And they say that the reason for that is that they've been underpricing over the years and they were being subsidized. Okay, so they no longer have the level of subsidy. So we as Caribbean people know, if I have to fly from Grenada to Trinidad, years ago we used to pay 100 EC,
Yeah,
100
it was affordable. You do it. Yeah.
Now it's 800 and 900 TT if you're going for a day. If you're going for longer than a day, it may be a little less.
Yeah.
You understand? So what I'm saying is, Byron, it doesn't seem, this is what I'm understanding as a business person, it doesn't seem that we understand the importance of communication via transport, whether it's air or sea, to transport cargo. I ship a lot of stuff to the OECS.
Yeah.
To transport cargo that is less than a container load is a nightmare to countries in the north, whether it is St. Vincent, Dominica, Antigua. Nightmare and huge costs. If you had to do a container, 20-foot container is cheaper because we have, and more consistent because you have the Kajimas and the Tropicals that travel every week, and they could take it, and geese to some extent. But the cost to the consumer on these islands, they may not want a full container load because of what you do and their business, the nature of the business. So getting an LCL increases the cost significantly. And the time, it may take me 3-4 weeks to get a boat to go to Dominica.
Wow.
Right? Or even more with an LCL. So the issue becomes the cost to our region of transport by marine, and of course now the cost by air. And we just doesn't seem to get CARICOM to, we hear a lot of talk about it, a lot of studies, we hear a lot of things about the open skies
so
policy.
That integration is not really going to happen if the people can't move.
Exactly. And we're talking about free movement of people. Excuse me. How we go move?
Can't be effective because it's too expensive. Chris, we have to take a short break. Viewers, we have to take a break. We'll be back. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are down to the top 16 in the 14th edition of the Carib YT Super Knockout. This weekend, we head to the Montrouge playing field for 2 days of football action. Saturday, November 9th from 7 p.m. Game 1 on Lace Authentic Sneaker Store SAFL versus Blast FC. Game 2, FC Camahorn versus Paradise FC Youth. Then on Sunday, November 10th, Game 1, Crollo FC versus Hillsborough Town FC. And in Game 2, Quartz Ready Cash, Queen's Park Rangers versus Fontenoy United. Admission on both days, $25. Live drummers, Carib girls, and lots of giveaways. Don't miss it. The 14th edition of the Carib YT Super Knockout is on. Don't miss a game.
Get ready! A new season of the Grenleg Debates is coming. Informative, impromptu, bright young minds sparking powerful ideas. The Grenleg Debates. The Grenleg Debates will be broadcasted on MTV Mondays and Thursdays at 9 p.m., Saturdays at 6 p.m., and on GVN TV Tuesdays and Thursdays at 6 p.m., Sundays at 4 p.m. Broadcast begins Saturday, October 7th. Tune in.
Welcome back, viewers, to MTV Community Forum. Your host, Byron Campbell, Chris Diali, co-host. Chris, there's an issue that I want to bring to the fore. It has to do with the role of the Physical Planning and Development Control Authority. They have an important mandate, Chris, and I can tell you. Their key mandate is to provide for the orderly, efficient development of resources in Grenada, taking into account all relevant social, economic, and environmental factors, so as to ensure that sustainable use is made of land in the interest of the people of Grenada. And Chris, if you break subject, no person shall commence or carry out the development of any land in Grenada without the prior written permission of the authority. And any person who contravenes that are subject to commit an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $50,000 or 3 years imprisonment. Now, I'm saying this first to understand the role of the physical plan, a very, very important role, because if they're not there, you have chaos. I'm not suggesting they're perfect, but we need to recognize their role and responsibility in our society to put some order to development. Because it's not just for ourselves, I always say, it's important for future generations. In the same context, I see the importance of a land use policy. Without a land use policy, I think it's reckless that we operate in as a country without an operational land use policy, so that we determine which lands are for what sector, whether it's for agriculture or recreation or for housing. It's a loose environment, So we're doing this without any thought about our children, those that are not yet born, So we need to be mindful of that. But here we understand the role of the authority. And I reference Beryl here. And the government has been promoting a Build Back Better. And that's good, one model was developed, it was showcased, it was launched. And I'm to understand that as much as 10 to 12 have started in Carriacou and in the north of the island. And that's good, maybe. But what's not good, Chris, is the fact that the drawings, the plans for this have not been submitted and approved by the Physical Planning Authority. The question is why? And not all it's one plan that you want, because all the houses are going to be built to specification. So why is that not done? This is unacceptable. If this is so, it is critical and important for the homeowners, the people who that it is checked, and the Physical Planning Authority verifies the integrity, the suitability of this house to ensure that it can withstand whatever level of hurricane it is designed for. That is one role of the authority. The second one is for other development. In the Woodford area, we have RENO, which is a foreign company. They have major contracts in Grenada, but they are establishing a quarry in a residential area. The residents are not aware of what's taking place. They have not been told, they've not been consulted. That's one. But worst is the fact that this development have not been approved by the Physical Planning Authority. No permission, I am told, reliably informed, have been provided for RENO to start the operation of a quarry. No environmental impact assessment, no consultation with the people living there. A quarry is going to generate significant noise and significant pollution. A quarry is a good thing. We need it. We need aggregates, but you have to do it properly in order. You know, it's reckless. I don't know, Chris. What's your so physical planning needs to do its work.
Well, you know, the reason we moved PPU, as it was referred to
Yeah.
before, it
Yeah.
was a unit of
The
Ministry of
government.
Finance.
Yes.
And the reason we statutarized the unit to an authority
Yeah.
is to give them the teeth under the law and the independence
Yeah.
to pursue certain actions as you have listed in your opening comments.
Yeah.
The fact that we had a hurricane pass through Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique and leveled the destruction that it did
Yeah.
indicated that the housing situation in Carriacou was not properly dealt with from an engineering point of view. When you look at the up there and the collapse and
Yeah.
the destruction,
Yeah.
government said we had to build back better. Excellent. But why would it be that we're not running these plans through the authority now to ensure that they meet the specifications under the law
Yeah.
as to how you need to construct for situations like that?
Mhm.
No new structure, house that's been built in Grenada now cannot go past unless they go through the authority of the Physical Development Authority and approved.
Yeah.
And it's not only structurally. You have to deal with sewage, you have to deal with water runoff,
Yeah.
drainage, all of
Yeah.
that needs to
Yeah.
be approved.
Yeah.
Ministry of
Yeah.
Health gets involved,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
forth. So
Yeah.
there's a process and a way to get it done. Yes, we need to build back quickly for burial and the people are out of homes.
Yeah. Urgently.
But you would expect that the model homes would have been approved
Mhm.
through the authority and say,
Yeah.
okay, you could do 20 because we approve one and it's cookie cutters,
Mhm.
essentially. And the same thing with the other housing company, private company that came in and offering houses for Carriacou, prefab houses.
Yeah.
We have to understand again that has not gone through the process.
No.
So I am worried about that in that aspect, and the government, of course, if that is happening, shooting itself in the foot. Then the issue of the land development, and you know, for years, Byron, we're talking about that.
Yeah.
We're talking about it from the aspect of NNP into now,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't seem to be happening. You're going to purposely build a hospital in lands in Wester Hall, new hospital, that is ideal lands for agriculture. Kariri had a whole set of things there doing work and development, and here we're proposing to build it because we believe that is the best spot. What happens to the
83 acres.
Yeah, right. What happens to that?
Yeah.
I agree with you on the physical and the developmental part and the
Yeah.
land use.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let me raise another one, and that one close to my chest.
Okay.
The fact that they announced,
Yeah.
the authority, that they will be dealing with all people on the side of the road selling food
Yeah.
in the conditions they were selling it and
Yeah.
moving them.
Yeah.
It has not happened. It started and it just got a sudden stop.
Port Highway is one of them.
Port Highway is one.
That's where they started.
We have a erection next to Fort Judy on the road there. When people stop there anyhow to buy something from the guy, it's a traffic congestion.
You know why it stopped? It's a political intervention. Clearly.
So the more we change, the more we remain the same. So why have an
But-
authority that you say you're given the permission, the legal teeth
Yeah.
to effect these changes, and nothing is
Look at
happening?
the traffic. How do I want to call it on a port highway? How would you call that? It's chaos.
You can't call it traffic jam.
You know, Chris. There's been a lot of comments everywhere, feedback from consumers about the rising food prices, higher cost of food prices. And I think certainly this comment has been made not only of imported foods, but local foods also. The question is why this is so. Is it part of inflation? Does it have to do with higher input costs for the farmers? I would just like to comment on this. I will say clearly farmers are having increased costs. And you have supply and demand also a factor. There is less available, so when you have less demand, price go up, as with every other commodity. You look at our water boots, for example, it used to be $40, $45, now it's $70. Cheapest one is $70, or the cost of fertilizer. So the cost of labor has gone up, minimum wage has gone up. So there's a lot of factors driving the local cost of agricultural inputs up. The question is, how do we, because food security has to deal with the question of not just the availability of food, but also the affordability of food, albeit it must also be nutritious and available. So how do we, what is required that we can make these foods, particularly our local foods, more affordable to our local consumers?
So I want to attack it from this point of view. And I fully agree that if costs have increased for the farmers, as it has,
Yes.
in various aspects,
Yeah.
that particularly labor,
Yeah.
where labor is a big aspect of
Yeah.
that. I can't even get people to work. But if that has, farmers' prices will go up, because you're not in this to be poor, you're in this to make money and have a decent living.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a business,
Yeah.
without a doubt. And in normal business, if raw material inputs go up, we transfer a certain percentage of that increased cost to the consumers.
Yeah.
So there is nothing wrong with that principle,
Yeah.
right? And supply and demand as well.
Yeah.
However, I want to attack it from this point of view. We do no production planning in this country. Absolutely none. And a lot of the input price increases here is among vegetables, short crops, and what you call dasheen and these
Yes, yeah.
things, ground provisions.
Food crops. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And what you're seeing is that we don't plan and say, okay, listen, we could get tomatoes 3 times a year if we don't have to wait on the season anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So if I assign 10 farmers in St. David's to do tomatoes, beans, cucumbers, whatever the case may be, and we know and we expect a certain amount to come from that 10 farmers, the part about the supply and demand will immediately get some effect. Because if you have more volume of particular foods available, the price will come down. Not to the point where the farmers can, because with more sales, even though you sell it for 10 cents or 15 cents less, the volume of sales will bring you back up.
Yes.
So it is to me, it is an issue of how we plan the production in the country. We get hit with beryl in St. Andrews and in the north of the country and Sotés. You can't get a banana to buy, green or ripe.
Well, you can get ripe ones now, Chris, but you know it's been imported from Santo Domingo.
Well, yeah, and that's and
Santo
the Santo
Domingo.
Domingo ones is subsidized, huh?
No, yes, it's
And-
subsidized.
And we
yes.
still, right.
And we
So-
getting dasheen from St. Vincent, and we're
Well,
getting oranges from
a
California.
recent report from
Yeah.
Barbados,
Yeah.
and talking about vegetables and
Yeah,
crops and so
Yeah,
on, and
yeah,
spoke about the St. Vincent
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
Because of the beryl effect on St. Vincent
Yeah.
on their agriculture.
yeah,
They can't even get stuff from St. Vincent.
Yeah.
They used to order a lot of vegetables and ground provisions
Yeah.
from St. Vincent.
Yeah.
And it's no longer
it's
available.
no longer available.
And even though it's available, the price you have to pay is making it, I wouldn't pay $7 a pound for some green bananas.
No,
And,
no.
I mean, a pound of green
But I
bananas.
think green bananas it should be. It's coming in now, eh? But Chris, one of the other things I want to mention as we are on the agriculture sector is, I want to say that the income support, $14 million that the government approved for to farmers, I think this is a very welcome program. I want to compliment the administration for this, because there was a lot of lost after Ivan. So if, for example, you were producing soursop, I'll give you an example, your trees may not have fell, but you lost the crop. You have to wait a year. So this income support, and for nutmeg farmers and all the farmers, crops, is necessary and very important. The problem, however, with this, Chris, I think, is the rollout, the organization, the structural arrangement for paying the money. And it's creating a lot of anger, frustration among the farming community. And I've seen it, spoken to them on their chat, they talk about it, in that it is not happening, and there is very inadequate communication from the ministry on what's happening about it and what the farmers should do. And so it's a good program, it's a worthy program, very critical, very important. But the government need to look at it closely and see how we can enhance because instead of the positive aspect of it, instead of the credits the government should get, it's been perceived as a negative, so it's having an adverse effect. So it's important that they look at it and structure it to make sure it delivers.
Justice delayed is no justice at all. And I'm starting with that because finance delayed
Yes.
is going to be interpreted that the farmers are going to go further away from agriculture
Yes.
and not come back and invest in the
Yes,
areas that
yes,
we need.
yes,
Because as
yeah.
far as they're concerned,
Yeah.
this is not making sense.
Yeah.
Between Purdy and Larceny
Yeah.
and potential hits from systems that will pass through,
Yeah.
a farmer will say, why plant a nutmeg tree that taking me 7 years to call or more? and then in one swoop, I
It's
lose.
gone. It's
You know,
gone.
so it becomes for a farmer, and that's why I started about the timing of these things and the payments.
Yeah.
The government didn't indicate that they didn't have the money. They said they had the money.
Had the money, so it's
And-
not the
But
yes.
we did express concern when they said they're going to distribute checks through the
Yeah.
constituency office and by ministers
Yes.
and representatives in the constituency.
Yeah.
So they added a political element to it. And you're wondering if this is not having some sort of effect. I could only wonder now, because they were the ones that put in the political aspect. Why couldn't this be done through a PS setting up a group committee within the Ministry of Agriculture to distribute
Sure.
these checks by parish?
Well, look at it. Take the Western District. You had 10 checks to give up. You had 4 ministers there for 10 checks. You had 10 persons. But there were another 40 farmers who didn't know. They just came out to get money. And there was no money for them. So the event created a negative... In other words, it had the opposite effect.
Well,
you
again,
know. It
it's,
didn't-
you
it
hear the
didn't.
Ministry
So-
of Agriculture seem to have fallen down on the administrative part
Yeah,
of it.
yeah,
Because it would appear that these 40 farmers that came for money wasn't aware of the process. And they had to
Exactly,
register themselves at
exactly.
the farm or whatever they were doing.
Exactly.
And you would have expected there would
Yeah.
have been an assessment done in the phases
Yeah.
to get this money done. So
Chris, let's talk politics now, man. Look,
let's go to health first before we go to
health.
politics.
Sure, Chris. Broken. You know, whether in the budget address, the finance minister talked about a broken health system. The new health minister, his first press conference, is talking about a broken system. So we call it broken. You know, but what he has said in recent time is that there are over 110 positions to be filled. Some of it in technical areas, in your labs and other nurses. You have to depend now on the brigades coming in, medical brigades, or on you asking retired nurses to come in. So you have a high attrition. You have more people, more nurses leaving than coming in. The government has, as a policy, provide an honorarium to nurses of $500. It was last year and they did it this year, and to doctors $1,000. So they've allocated $4.2 million. So I think by doing that, the government recognized that the salaries are inadequate, and that's a factor that
But
is...
the honorarium is only paid when they're training.
No, the honorarium is paid to all nurses working in the system
Yeah,
and
but
all doctors.
If you get appointed in the system
Yeah, in the
as a
system.
nurse,
So that's
you
when
don't-
you get the $500.
No. The honorarium starts when you apply to do nursing.
Yeah,
So whilst you're doing nursing,
yeah.
they pay you this $500, and doctors as well.
Oh.
But when you get established or you get employed,
You don't get that.
no, it increases your salary,
Yeah.
whatever grade,
Yeah.
you get a full salary.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, I know that because in TAMCC we used to do nursing nurse training.
But what I
So-
understand was this was an honorarium that came in last year, specifically for nurses and doctors that are working in the system. That might be something different. So the government agreed to continue it for this year, and
Right.
therefore allocated $4.2 million.
The honorarium was always there.
Yeah, but
Always
this is last year and this year as far as making budgetary allocation.
Yeah, that's
so
politics.
so it didn't stop here. So the other thing, Chris, that's important is the National Health Insurance Scheme. We were told in December last year that a contract was signed with a Grenadian neurosurgeon and his team to implement phase 1 of the National Health Insurance. They are saying that the go-to date, the date when it will launch, according to the budget address, would be November next year, 25. But a year since this contract was signed, we have not seen any stakeholders consultations. We have not, and I must mention $3.5 million was allocated for this contract, yeah? But a year later, we've seen no stakeholders consultations, and we have received no update. What we, besides the government talking about the broken system in the health sector, they're talking about a new state-of-art hospital that $36 million was spent to acquire the 83.9 acres at Calavini. And what they indicated last year was this would take 3 years to complete this new project. But the question is, how do we move from a broken health system to becoming the healthcare capital of the OECS? That's a huge transition,
I think
which
we-
is the goal, given our current situation that is unacceptable to our citizens, especially those that don't have a US visa, don't have medical insurance, can't afford to go to a private hospital, and when something happened to them, they have to do motorcade around the island. This is unfair to our citizens, and I think we could do better than that. So why can't we? But the question, Chris, which we focus on, how do we transition to becoming? If we are unable to operate our basic system as it is, call it however you want, how do we transition to being the healthcare capital of the OECS? How? Explain that to me, Chris.
Well,
I mean, you're not the health minister, but
I can't explain that. What I will say, I will echo what
Yeah.
Dr. Antoine had said last week,
right.
that to become a premier thing of the OECS, you have to have the staffing, the technical people, the equipment, and the facility. We're talking about the facility of 36 million.
Yeah.
We're not talking staff.
No. The land alone
Sorry,
is
the land.
36 million. Yeah.
So-
the facility is much more.
Right. So the facility of multi-millions,
Yeah.
we had to staff it.
Yeah.
We have problem with nursing, and we had to equip it.
Yeah.
We had one we did on the western side, just outside of Gulf, and I'm told that it's not properly staffed, nor properly equipped.
It's a beautiful facility.
Beautiful facility. So here we're looking to go into more brick and mortar. And we're not talking about what is going to happen to the one that currently exists, with all the equipment we have invested there and what is going to happen. So this conversation is very one-sided. Then you come to the NHI issue that we have not heard much about,
Yeah.
the National Health Insurance, because as you indicated, affordability of medicines and treatment to people is something that needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
So if you come in an emergency, you get treatment,
Yeah.
or what happens after.
Yeah.
Simple blood test in the hospital is what they charge is grossly under what it costs. So how do we deal with that and get people to understand they must pay in order to get the kind of thing, standards of medicine that we want? And we
Yeah.
know here that Mount Sinai has been brought in to evaluate the health system, the hospital thing in particular, and advise the government on top of NHI. We want to know if Mount Sinai contract was free or not, and whether or not the process that we operate in of there can be something that we have to dismantle and do something new or modify. And then another issue we don't talk about at all, Byron, is the people in the current system, administrators and others, and how they operate. I mean, we have heard many stories about a sheet in some parts of the country on the line joining Mark General Hospital. And the General Hospital, but let's talk about one positive thing though, the issue of primary health care in Grenada.
Yeah.
We have an excellent primary health care
Yeah.
system
Yeah.
throughout the state.
Yes.
That probably needs to be developed a little more. And I've heard recently on the news there's a antenatal and prenatal issue of dental health care for our ladies, and which is an excellent,
Yeah.
excellent initiative. We have people in the US that have to fly down here to get dental treatment.
Yeah.
We have an excellent dental
Yeah.
treatment
Yeah.
sector in Grenada,
Yeah.
and a lot of it is done by Cuban specialists, which is a good thing. And the cost is not as phenomenal as other parts of the world. So we have that good side of it,
Yeah.
the dental side.
So it's not all bad.
It's not all bad,
Yes.
but the other side, of course, is how do we get what we have
Yeah.
to work properly,
Yeah.
and people to be able to access the equipment and the facilities
Yeah.
and the specialists,
Yeah.
versus, in my view, going into brick and mortar.
And I agree, and I wanna big up, as we say, congratulate the staff at the General Hospital, the nurses, the doctors, orderlies, all the support staff, for the job they're doing, given the limited resources that they have. We should emulate these people. They work under very, very difficult conditions.
And let me
so
end on this nursing
Yeah.
issue. I have said publicly and before, and when I was in the Senate, we need to change the training for our nurses from the point of view that we need to be supplier. If we have a situation where every time we train 100, 60 of them go, and we have 40, and we're paying them pits,
Yeah.
so that is why they keep going, and we
Right.
can't afford.
Yeah.
Why don't we come up with a system and say, okay, I have 100 nurses to train, I'm willing to give you 60 of these nurses to go to England, Canada,
Yeah.
the US.
Yeah.
They're getting their RN degree, and at the end of it, let us develop a policy as to how, when they get there, what benefits they get, so forth and so on. And those that stay here, when we, for want of a better word, when we
Yeah.
sell these nurses,
Yeah.
the monies could now go back into their program and give them better salary and benefits.
Yeah. So it's a win-win
Why
situation.
can't we transition to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
We have been doing it for many years. Our population have not moved beyond
Yeah.
110, 115,000
Mhm.
for many years. What I'm talking about where they are.
Chris, let's go into the politics, man. I don't have a lot of time. Chris,
Yeah.
of course, NNP is still in its, what stages is that? Trying to determine its future and its leadership situation, you know.
Right.
And of course, they've been having a number of zonal meetings.
Had a recent
My
one
take on
in
these
the diaspora
meetings
in New
in the
York.
diaspora in New York, the political leader, Dr. Mitchell, has been ranting a lot about bad behavior of some members, meaning that some might be offering bribes to delegates. And but what was interesting, I think what stood out for me, Chris, there is in an interview, I think it was GBN, host Dow, was asking him about the leadership potential of some key, I think about Cox, Emlyn Pierre, Cox, Pierre, Horsford, and David. Peter was the last one asked about, but at Horsford and Cox and Emlyn Pierre, he spoke about the potential leadership, you know, and in a positive way. But when Peter David name came up, when he's asked about it, his response was it had to do with trust. You know, what trust was the issue. Dr. Mitchell said that it's a work in progress. He says that I have discussed this with him, you know, but trust has to do with your integrity and your honesty. So this is like fundamental to the person. And I'm surprised that MP David didn't respond.
Is that a Lacquette issue?
Ah.
A Lacquette issue?
Well, similarly,
Trust?
in the case when Trust came up with the Prime Minister and Lacquette was fired on the spot. You know, of course, it's a different condition. I just
but
found
trust
it.
is fundamental
Yeah.
in seeing
Yeah.
whether this person, as part of
Yeah.
my party, could
Yeah.
continue for the long term.
Yeah.
If he has a trust issue with Peter David, well,
Yeah.
then Peter David have no chance, from Dr. Mitchell's point of view,
Yeah.
of gaining the leadership of the party.
Yeah, yeah.
That may be different when it comes to the convention and
Yeah.
voting and delegates
Yeah.
and so on.
Yeah.
So we don't know, but I think what was important, what struck me in the last week was the report given by Dr. Pierre,
Yeah.
the Canadian
Yes,
statistician,
Canadian. Yes.
which signaled to the NDC government that as far as he's concerned, the win is not automatic in the next election,
Yeah.
because the ground game seems to be lacking a lot. And I think when you look at what have been happening with the General Secretary in
Yeah.
the last few weeks,
Yeah.
and he's been hammered in fact of not
General
preparing-
Secretary of NDC. Yes.
of not
yeah,
preparing
yeah.
the party to
Yeah,
get the political
yeah,
grounds
yeah,
that
yeah,
they need to get,
yeah.
because the machinery politically on the ground does stop when they get into government,
Yeah.
because a lot of the people go into government. So it is appearing that Dr. Pierre is indicating from a leadership point of view, Deacon Mitchell far outstrips Dr. Mitchell because of age and style and so on, and young people are
Popularity,
attracted-
yes, yeah.
young people are attracted to his style of politics versus Dr. Mitchell's
Yeah.
style of politics. So that is one positive for the NEC, but he's also signaling to them that in particular constituencies, if they don't get the act in order, automatic win in the next election is not guaranteed.
One of the things Dr. Pierce said also, Chris, had to do with the NDC agenda. He would have carried out some research investigation on the transformative agenda and concluded that very few persons, none at all, were able to outline what was transformed, what was different in their lives after 2 years. You know, what for them was the transformative agenda, and they couldn't say. So he concluded that this is something that the government needs to address, that agenda, because this is going to come up. That was one of the attraction of their
The voting population.
of the voting population. One could say, well, the new hospital is one of those transformative agenda, but to what extent is it touching persons now? You see, without an explanation or without, and I think our colleague William Joseph has spoken about this issue too, in saying that it's all well and good to have a transformative agenda. It's desirable, but it need to be documented. The population need to understand it. You know?
Let me tell you how I
Yeah.
interpret this, Byron.
Yeah.
The transformative agenda is like a strategic policy the government
Yeah.
will have developed.
Yeah.
So in business, we have a strategic 2-year plan, 3-year plan,
Yeah.
and we track it
Yeah.
in terms of what we consider to be short, medium, and long
Yeah.
over that time. If you have a transformative agenda which is going to speak to the strategy of how you want to change things
Yeah.
fundamentally,
Yeah.
then you need to have this listed.
Yeah.
People get to know about it, the benefits and so on, and how we're going to understand it, and the timelines.
And a timeline.
And who is working on this transformative
Yeah.
agenda?
Yeah.
How is it going? Not you reacting to things that's happening day to day in the politics and what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you look at Dr. Pierre's report, a lot of people are still supportive of this transformative aspect of the campaign that NDC launched, but they haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
You're heading into an election in the next 2 years thereabout. Is it that you're going to start dealing with the transformative agenda and that time is too short?
It's too short.
When you came into government, you had to have had this prepared and indicate to people what you're going to transform
Yeah.
and how it's fundamentally going to improve their lives. That has not been done. That has not worked out. We don't know what is the agenda. We don't know what is the timelines. So I think they need to pay close attention to that as they go forward.
I agree, Chris. And well, I'm telling our viewers that we've invited Dr. Pierre next week to elaborate on some of those issues and some of his findings from his investigation. So next week we'll have Dr. Pierre. And Chris, that's all the time we have. But before we close, I just want to tell you, Chris, that flogging is now illegal in Grenada. No court can.
I don't agree with it, but
No, I mean, I don't agree with it. So it's illegal. You know, it won't happen again. Viewers, that's all the time we have. We'll see you next week, same time, same
we
place.
could start off with flogging.
Bye-bye.
I just get
Ladies and gentlemen, we are down to the top 16 in the 14th edition of the Carib YT Super Knockout. This weekend, we head to the Mont Rouge playing field for 2 days of football action. Saturday, November 9th from 7 p.m. Game 1 on Lace Authentic Sneaker Store SAFL versus Blast FC. Game 2, FC Camahorn versus Paradise FC Youth. Then on Sunday, November 10th, Game 1, Crollo FC versus Hillsborough Town FC. And in Game 2, Ports Ready Cash, Queen's Park Rangers versus Fontenoy United. Admission on both days, $25. Live drummers, Carib girls, and lots of giveaways. Don't miss it. The 14th edition of the Carib YT Super Knockout is on. Don't miss a game.
Using alcohol as a coping method after an emergency or disaster can lead to serious health problems such as chronic liver disease and cirrhosis, or scarring of the liver and permanent damage. Try talking to a therapist or other health